Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for being here, for your interest and participation in this briefing session. I will begin this press briefing with a short overview, and then I will open the floor for question and answer session. As many of you may know, the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or the NPT, is widely regarded as the cornerstone of the international non-proliferation and disarmament regimes. It is one of the most successful multilateral treaties based on its verifiable non-proliferation obligations, legally binding disarmament commitments, facilitation of the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, and its near-universal status. Next year will mark the 50th anniversary of the NPT's entry into force, and as we approach this milestone in the treaty's history, states parties to the NPT are working to ensure it retains its central place in all countries' security. In this context, it is important to highlight that members of the treaty have, for the last 2 weeks, considered some of the most important issues related not only to nuclear weapons, but also to international peace and security. This session of the NPT Preparatory Committee has taken place at a time of increasing international tension and deteriorating relationship between those countries that possess nuclear weapons. This context has created significant challenges with regard to the achievement of the objectives of the treaty. Nevertheless, I have been heartened by the way in which parties to the NPT have conducted themselves during our deliberations. They have engaged with each other in a way that fully reflects both the importance of the treaty and their commitment to it. NPT parties do not agree on everything, but they have remained resolute in their commitment to the full implementation of the treaty across all 3 of its pillars. In our deliberations, countries have discussed the need for the full and urgent implementation of all obligations under the treaty, as well as to commitments made at previous review conference. They have engaged in open dialogue on how to accelerate progress towards a world free of nuclear weapons, including through measures to prevent their proliferation. They have also considered how to best facilitate the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, particularly to developing countries, in accordance with Article 4 of the treaty. And they have deliberated on how to strengthen the treaty so it is able to remain for purpose. As chair, I have done my best to align competing and dissenting views and to highlight common ground. It is my hope that throughout the course of this preparatory committee meeting, we have helped to lay the ground for a successful outcome in 2020. I continue to encourage all parties to continue to work towards this end and to engage in the transparent, frank, and inclusive dialogue necessary to make it a reality. Despite its remarkable durability, the future health and vitality of the NPT cannot and should not be taken for granted, as the stakes are too high. On this note, I open the floor for any questions. Thank you. Please.
Hello, my name is Shauna McGee from Kyoto News, and I'm so sorry my throat is bad. But on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, thank you so much for holding this briefing. And everybody in this room, I believe, has been following very closely the 2 weeks of deliberations, and we know that your recommendations were not adopted. However, could you tell us how specifically you see the end of this conference as a success, and could you give us a little bit more detail of how you hope it will lay the groundwork for a successful NPT, next year's review conference? Thank you so much.
Well, this PrepCom has several mandates to it. One is, of course, to come up with the consensus outcome document with recommendations. The other one is also to consider procedural matters with regard to the 2020 review conference. And I must thank the cooperation of all state parties with regard to procedural matters. We have managed to take a decision on all procedural matters, including on the agenda, the rules of procedures, and even on the presidency of the review conference. So I am happy to say that in 2020, the review conference president can start the conference and concentrate on substantive work. Now, on substance, we have tried to bridge the gaps between all the states parties. I've come up with my first draft recommendations, and many state parties expressed their views and comments on it. So based on those comments, I tried to distill all those comments and try to find language that could at least offer possibility for delegations to work on towards consensus. And given the lack of time that we have, we were not able to take more work on it. And as such, I have decided to submit the draft recommendations as a working paper. Of course, it's under my authority, so states parties can decide whether to take it or not. But at the end of the day, the review conference itself will decide on how to move forward, regardless if we have a consensus document even. It will be a basis, but not necessarily the main. I mean, they can still come up with other suggestion or recommendations that would come out as the possible outcome document in the review conference 2020. I should just like to highlight another thing is that it is my feeling that I think based also on the express views by many delegations, this PrepCom states parties have approached it in a positive atmosphere with a positive attitude. The atmosphere relatively mostly are quite positive. Yeah, we had some exchange of views in the rights of reply, but the next day they come back and work constructively. Even during the reading of the recommendations, I see that they have been genuine in coming up with proposals, try to build upon on the revised text. So I think this also not to be, we should not forget also about this atmosphere and positive atmospheric that the third PrepCom has managed to achieve during this session. And I think that will be very helpful as we work towards preparing for the review conference in 2020. Yes, please.
The United States expressed concern that none of their suggestions made it into the recommendations, the second draft of the recommendations. First of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, a number of delegations expressed concern that consensus is never able to be reached at these types of preparatory conferences. Is that a concern, do you think? Or is consensus the goal? Or is it just to have a dialogue?
Well, the mandate that is given to the third PrepCom is to come up with a consensus document, outcome document with recommendations. But so far we have not managed to do it. But without an outcome document of the third PrepCom, the review there have been also successful review conferences. So it's not something that is lost. What is being discussed even during the PrepCom, there are some areas of convergence and could be used by states parties to bring forward to the review conference. Well, on the question about the United States proposals, there have been a lot of proposals, not only from the United States, from NAM, from the new agenda of coalition, from other states as well, from China. So I have to strike a balance on paragraphs or on language that I think could be worked on during this PrepCom for a consensus document. So that's so you can say that not all proposals from states are taken aboard, but some or most are taken aboard. So it's always a question of which one that you think as chair that could bring forward discussion with a view that there's a possibility to achieve consensus. It's not easy given the international environment that we are facing, the divergence of views that we have at the moment. But I hope that the working paper could at least serve as a basis that state parties can take on and reflect, so that when come 2020, they can work on something substantively with regard to strengthening the treaty. Yes, sir.
Could you probably mention a few areas where there was consensual agreement? We know a lot about the disagreements which have taken place. I understand also on the Iran deal and China saying DPRK doesn't belong here, doesn't belong to the NPT, and the United States having several points of its own. A particular question would be, it seems there's an agreement that there should be this Middle East conference on WMDs and on nuclear weapons free zone, which is scheduled for November. But there are also, I would say, unconfirmed reports that the United States are not very excited about it, and this may not even take place here in New York.
Well, one area that I think enjoy a lot of consensus is on peaceful uses. So there are a lot of convergence on that. On nuclear disarmament, there are not many, given the positions of nuclear weapon states, the differences between the nuclear weapon states and the non-nuclear weapon states. On the questions of the Middle East weapons of mass destruction free zone, I think the chair has been, I think the president has been named. They are working towards that conference in November. So from what it seems, it's going to take place. The question is who will come. So that I think has not been, we cannot finalize yet. So the conference will take place. There have been a lot of expression of support with regard to the questions of the Middle East weapons of mass destruction free zone during this PrepCom. Of course, it's one of the issues that is important, which in 1995 that provided for the indefinite extension of the treaty. So it is an important issue, and now there is a second track outside of the NPT at the moment. The conference will be held in November, but come 2020, I think the review conference will have to take a look back at how the conference take place and the outcome decision of that conference. From what I understand, it's going to be an annual conference. The aspirations of those behind it. So we'll have to see how the conference will take place first, and how it will contribute or impact on the discussion in the 2020 review conference next year. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sato from Japan NHK. My question to you is about DPRK. There are a lot of concern raised inside the chamber during this period. In meantime, that there are several missile launch from the North DPRK, and yesterday U.S. announced that it was the ballistic missile, even if it is short range. So, what's your message to the North Korea in terms of the non-proliferation? And also, one more question is about Hibakusha, atomic bomb survivor. You have met with some of the Hibakusha, and so could you tell us what was your impression, and what do you think the power of Hibakusha in terms of the motivate the NPT treaty? Thank you.
Thank you. On the issue of DPRK, I think in the PrepCom there was a lot of support with regard to the dialogue or the summit between the US and the DPRK, as well as the dialogue between the DPRK and the Republic of Korea. And there has been a lot of support and hope for this engagement to continue, so that we will not lose momentum with a view towards working towards the nuclearization of the DPRK and the stability in the Korean Peninsula. There are some differences of opinions or views or positions among state parties on it, but by and large, all states parties, I would say, are hopeful that maybe in another way would like for the dialogue to continue, and the momentum should not be lost, because it will be a lost opportunity, I think, after such a positive development, and that is, I think, the message that we should put forward to the public, also to the DPRK on this issue. And with regard to Hibakusha, it was the first time that I met surviving Hibakusha, and I thought that it's very important for what the role that they are playing. There are not many of them left, and their role is important in terms of creating awareness and informing, especially the younger generations, of the effect of the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so that the present generation as well as future generation realize that the human catastrophic consequences of these bombs, and how important the work towards nuclear disarmament, especially in the NPT. So I think what they're doing, the message that they are bringing, is a powerful message, and we should continue to support them to deliver this powerful message throughout the world. Yes, sir. At the back.
Thank you, George Baumgarten. Staying on this DPRK theme, if I may, do I understand correctly that the DPRK and its recent series of successive tests came up only tangentially, and they just want to, as they say here at the UN, remain seized of the matter, and that it bears watching? Do I understand that correctly?
I do not want to discuss that, but I think the message that the NPT PrepCom is delivering, or the discussion during the NPT PrepCom, is that the dialogue should continue, and because otherwise we will go further away from the objective of denuclearization of DPRK and peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula.
So by that you mean the dialogue between the United States and the DPRK and
as
President Kim.
yeah, as well as the dialogue between the two Koreans. You're welcome. Yes, sir. You have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. Number one about Hibakusha. Did you have any idea or suggestion from others to have words of Hibakusha or Hiroshima Nagasaki in the first draft of the recommendations? And the second question is, can you tell me whether or how you believe you can bridge the gap between nuclear countries and the other countries concerning the disarmament in next year's review conference? Thank you.
On the second questions, it's quite difficult to do it, but certainly I would support the idea of they having conversation and dialogue. I think that came out quite strongly also during this session. That dialogue in between, not only between non-nuclear weapon states and the nuclear weapon states, should continue or intensify, but also between the nuclear weapon states themselves. So the NPT does provide that avenues, but it is not enough. It has also it also need to be done outside of the NPT, either bilaterally or in other forums, because without this conversation, we will not be able to bridge the differences between the nuclear weapon states and especially between the non-nuclear weapon states and the non-nuclear weapon states. I mean, during this PrepCom, we can see that the views are still quite wide apart on how to move forward with regard to the implementation of Article 6 dealing with nuclear disarmament. So that has to continue. I think during this PrepCom, it has started a bit for the review conference 2020 cycle. It definitely has to continue further. There are a lot of side events that also will be helpful, track 2 events, etc., etc. So basically, conversation and dialogue should not stop, because otherwise you will have conversation that is going only this way, and there's no connection. So I think that is important. On Hibakusha, your specific question on Hibakusha on recommendations that I didn't see during the PrepCom, but many have expressed appreciation with regard to their participation during the NPT PrepCom. As I said, perhaps their message, their powerful message could be, I mean, I'm sure they will be also in the 2020 review conference, but it's something for the next president to think on how to employ them to deliver this powerful message, perhaps strongly. Yes, please.
Thank you, Lanka White from the Mainichi newspaper. I just wanted to ask you, could you by any chance compare anyhow this PrepCon in comparison to the past Prep conferences? What has been achieved more than in the past one, or some overview?
Well, I was not involved in the last PrepCom, so I could not compare, but at least from what I've been hearing from states parties, they have said that it's more challenging this time, but this time at least the atmosphere, the positive tone of the deliberation was most welcome, and I hope that spirit of cooperation and constructiveness and the willingness of state parties to discuss and deliberate with civility and diplomacy will continue in the 2020 review conference, because without positive atmosphere, it will be much worse. So I think we stand a better chance when we are constructive and the tone is much more positive. Yes, please.
Shortly before the conference began, the Iranian foreign minister warned that Iran may walk out of the NPT. Was it an issue of discussion at the PrepCom?
No, it wasn't this time. I think state parties are still looking at the how to see the decisions and the impact on JCPOA. So it didn't come up during this PrepCom.
Iran deal was discussed.
The
walkout of the United States, or
well, yeah, because JCPOA was discussed during the PrepCom. Yeah.
And was there any, let's say, consensus achieved?
No,
how to assess that?
Because we do not have a consensus outcome document, so there was no consensus on that. But there was also a strong support with regard to JCPOA and the need for all state parties to continue their commitments to it. So this new decision is something that all the state parties have to look at it and decide on how to move forward on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much for your time, and have a good weekend.